The crack echoed across the emptiness like a gunshot, and Olivia Kendrick felt her heart drop into her boots as the wagon lurched violently to the left. She yanked back on the reins, bringing the horses to a stuttering halt on the dusty trail that wound through the pine-studded foothills of the Sierra Nevada. The August heat of 1879 beat down mercilessly, and as she climbed down from the driver's seat with shaking legs, she already knew what she would find. The rear wheel had splintered clean through, spokes jutting out at impossible angles, the iron rim twisted like a broken promise. She stood there in the middle of nowhere, halfway between Truckee, California, and the mining settlement she had been heading toward with her wagon load of supplies. Her father's store had trusted her to make this delivery, had believed she could handle the route alone now that she was 22 and capable. The nearest town lay at least 15 miles behind her, and the mining camp was still 12 miles ahead through increasingly rough terrain. The sun was already past its zenith, and the thought of spending a night out here alone sent a chill through her despite the heat. Olivia wiped the sweat from her forehead and surveyed the landscape. Towering ponderosa pines cast scattered shadows across the rocky ground, and in the distance, the mountains rose up like ancient sentinels. A hawk circled overhead, its cry sharp and lonely. She had enough water for maybe 2 days if she was careful, and some dried meat and biscuits. But walking 15 miles back to Truckee in this heat, especially with no guarantee of meeting anyone on the trail, seemed like a death sentence. She was considering unhitching one of the horses and riding back for help when she heard it. The steady clip of hooves on the hard, packed earth, coming from the direction of Truckee. Olivia's hand instinctively went to the rifle in the wagon, because out here you never knew who might be riding up on you. Could be a decent man. Could be trouble. The rider came into view around a bend in the trail, and Olivia kept her hand near the rifle as she watched him approach. He sat tall in the saddle, a bay gelding moving at an easy pace beneath him. As he drew closer, she could make out the details. A man somewhere in his mid-20s, she guessed, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell to his collar beneath a battered brown hat. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, denim and leather, and a red bandana tied around his neck. His face was angular and handsome in a rough-hewn way, with intelligent eyes that took in the situation immediately. He reined in his horse about 10 feet from the wagon and touched the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, miss. Looks like you have got some trouble there." His voice was deep and steady, with an easy Western drawl that somehow made Olivia feel less panicked. She relaxed her stance slightly, but kept her wariness. "Wheel broke about 10 minutes ago. I am stuck between towns with no way to fix it." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with practiced grace and approached the wagon, giving her a respectful distance as he crouched down to examine the damage. Up close, Olivia could see the strong line of his jaw, the way his shoulders filled out his shirt, and the competent way his hands moved as he tested the broken spokes. There was something reassuring about him, something that made her instincts say he was safe. "That is a pretty bad break," he said, straightening up and meeting her eyes. They were brown, she noticed, warm like honey in sunlight. "But I have seen worse. Name is Quentin Zimmerman. I work on a ranch about 8 miles west of Truckee. Was heading up to the mining camps myself to see about some work." "Olivia Kendrick," she replied, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "My father owns the general store in Truckee. This is his wagon, and I was making a delivery." Quentin nodded, his gaze moving back to the wheel. "Well, Miss Kendrick, I cannot promise it will be pretty, but I think I can fix this well enough to get you to the mining camp at least. Maybe even back to Truckee if we are lucky and you take it slow." Hope flared in Olivia's chest. "Really? But the wheel is completely broken. Not completely, Quentin said, walking around to his horse and beginning to untie his bedroll and saddlebags. The hub is still solid and the rim is bent but not cracked through. If I can reinforce the spokes and shore up the structure, it should hold. One not be comfortable, but it will roll. He laid out his supplies on the ground, and Olivia watched in fascination as he took stock of what he had. A coil of strong rope, some rawhide strips, a small axe, a hunting knife, wire meant for mending fence, and various other odds and ends that a traveling man might carry. It did not look like much, but Quentin studied the broken wheel with the focused intensity of a man solving a puzzle. "I am going to need to find some sturdy branches," he said, glancing toward the tree line. "Pine is not ideal, but if I can find some with the right diameter and density, they will work to splint the broken spokes. You comfortable staying here alone for a few minutes?" "I have been alone for the last hour," Olivia said with a slight smile. "I think I can manage a few more minutes." Quentin returned her smile, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges and making him look younger. "I will be quick." He disappeared into the trees with his axe, and Olivia found herself watching the spot where he had vanished with an odd flutter in her stomach. She shook her head at herself. This was hardly the time to be noticing how broad his shoulders were, or how his smile had made her heart skip. The man was helping her out of pure decency, nothing more. But when Quentin returned about 15 minutes later, his arms loaded with carefully selected branches, Olivia could not help but notice the way his muscles moved under his shirt as he worked. He had rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with strength from years of ranch work. He worked with complete concentration, using his knife to strip the branches and shape them, testing their flexibility and strength. "Can I help?" Olivia asked, feeling useless standing there watching. Quentin glanced up, considering. "Actually, yes. I need to jack up the wagon to take the weight off this wheel. There is a rock outcropping about 20 yards that way. If you could gather some of the flattest stones you can carry, I will need them to build up a stable base." Olivia was grateful for something to do. She spent the next while selecting stones, testing their flatness, and carrying them back to where Quentin had already positioned the jack he had pulled from under the wagon seat. They worked in companionable silence, and Olivia found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. There was something deeply attractive about a man who knew how to use his hands, who could look at a problem and see a solution. By the time she had gathered enough stones, the sun had moved noticeably across the sky. Quentin built up a careful platform and slowly jacked up the wagon until the broken wheel hung free. Then he began the painstaking process of his repair. He used the stripped branches as splints, positioning them against the broken spokes and binding them tightly with the rawhide strips, which he soaked in water first to make them pliable. "The rawhide will shrink as it dries," he explained as he worked, his fingers moving with surprising dexterity. "That will make it grip even tighter. Then I will wrap wire around the whole thing to add more support." "Where did you learn to do this?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. "Grew up on a ranch in Wyoming," Quentin said, not looking up from his work. "My father always said a man who cannot fix what breaks is not worth much. We were always miles from any kind of help, so you learned to make do with what you had or you did not survive. Do you miss it? Wyoming?" Quentin paused and something flickered across his face. "Sometimes. My parents are both gone now. Ranch got sold off. I have been drifting west for the past few years, working where I can find it. California is as far west as a man can go before he runs out of land." There was a loneliness in his voice that resonated with Olivia. Her own mother had died when she was 16, leaving just her and her father to run the store. She understood what it was like to lose your anchor, to feel like you were floating without direction. Truckee is a good town, she said softly. Hard in the winters, but the people are decent. There is always work for someone willing to do it. Quentin met her eyes, and something passed between them in that moment, some unspoken understanding. I will keep that in mind, he said quietly. He returned to his work, and Olivia watched as the repair slowly took shape. It was not pretty, as he had warned, but it was ingenious. He used every scrap of material he had, even cutting strips from his own spare shirt to add additional binding. When he worked on the bent rim, carefully using rocks as hammers to beat it back into a rounder shape, Olivia found herself marveling at his patience and skill. "You are good at this," she said. "Had a lot of practice," Quentin replied, testing the strength of his splints. "Though I will admit, this is probably the most complicated field repair I have attempted. Your father is going to need to replace this wheel properly when you get back to Truckee, but this should get you there." The sun was sinking lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Quentin wrapped the wire around the repaired spokes, creating a web of support, then stepped back to examine his work. "That is about the best I can do," he said. "Let us lower it down and see if it holds." Slowly, carefully, he released the jack. The wagon settled onto the repaired wheel, and for a heart-stopping moment, Olivia thought she heard something crack. But the wheel held. It looked like something held together by sheer determination and prayer, but it held. "I do not think you should try to make it to the mining camp today," Quentin said, straightening up and wiping his hands on his pants. "That repair needs time for the rawhide to fully dry and tighten, and honestly, Miss Kendrick, you look exhausted." Olivia wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. The stress of the day had caught up with her, and the thought of trying to navigate the increasingly rough trail ahead in the failing light made her stomach knot with anxiety. "I do not suppose there is an inn nearby," she said with a weak attempt at humor. Quentin smiled. "No inn, but there is a decent clearing about a half-mile back that I passed on my way here. Good grass for the horses, some shelter from the rocks, and a small spring. We could camp there for the night, head back to Truckee at first light. That wheel will do better on the trail back to town than trying to push on to the mining camps anyway." The word "we" did not escape Olivia's notice, and she felt a rush of relief that she would not have to spend the night alone out here. Then propriety reared its head, and she hesitated. "I do not want to compromise my reputation," she said carefully. "If anyone found out I spent the night alone with a man—" "I understand," Quentin said immediately, his tone respectful. "I will sleep on the far side of the clearing. Anyone asks, I was camped separately and just happened to be nearby." "But Miss Kendrick, I cannot in good conscience leave you out here alone, and I cannot in good conscience let you try to drive that wagon in the dark on a wheel held together with rope and prayer." He was right, and Olivia knew it. She nodded. "The clearing sounds good. And thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I do not know what I would have done if you had not come along." "Quentin," he said, "and you seem like a resourceful woman. I am sure you would have figured something out." They worked together to turn the wagon around, a delicate process with the damaged wheel, and made the slow journey back to the clearing Quentin had mentioned. It was everything he had promised, a sheltered spot surrounded by pines with a clear spring bubbling up from between rocks. Quentin helped her unhitch the horses and tend to them, his hands gentle with the animals in a way that made Olivia trust him even more. As the darkness settled in and stars began to appear in the vast sky above, Olivia made a simple meal from her supplies while Quentin built a small fire. They sat on opposite sides of the flames, propriety maintained but the companionship undeniable. The firelight played across Quentin's features, and Olivia found herself studying him when he was not looking, memorizing the line of his profile, the way his hands rested on his knees. "Tell me about Truckee," Quentin said after a while, his voice easy in the darkness. "What is it like living in a mountain town?" So Olivia told him about the town that had grown up around the railroad, about the harsh winters when snow could pile up taller than a man, about the summers when tourists came through on their way to see Lake Tahoe. She told him about her father's store, about the dreams she had of expanding it, maybe opening another location. She talked more than she usually did, drawn out by his genuine interest and the intimacy of the firelight. "You love it," Quentin observed. "The store, the town. It is in your voice when you talk about it." "I do," Olivia admitted. "It is home, the only home I have ever known. What about you? Do you think you will ever settle down, or are you going to keep drifting?" Quentin was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "I thought I wanted to keep moving," he said finally. "Thought maybe if I kept going, I would find whatever it was I was looking for. But lately, I have been thinking it might be nice to have a place to belong again. A community. Roots. Roots are good," Olivia said softly. "They give you something to hold on to when the winds blow hard." Their eyes met across the fire, and Olivia felt that flutter in her stomach again, stronger this time. There was something happening here, something that had nothing to do with broken wagon wheels and everything to do with the way Quentin looked at her, like she was the most interesting person he had ever met. The night grew deeper, and eventually Quentin stood up, banking the fire carefully. "You should get some sleep, Miss Kendrick. We will want to start back at first light." "Olivia," she said, mirroring his earlier invitation. "If I am calling you Quentin, you should call me Olivia." He smiled, that transformative smile that made her heart skip. "Good night, Olivia." "Good night, Quentin." She climbed into the back of the wagon, using her bedroll to make a comfortable spot among the supplies. Through the canvas, she could see Quentin's shadow as he made his own camp on the far side of the clearing, keeping his promise to maintain propriety. But knowing he was there, that he was watching over the camp, made Olivia feel safer than she had in a long time. She woke once in the deep night to the sound of something moving in the brush. Her hand went to the rifle, but Quentin's low voice called softly, "Just a deer. Go back to sleep." Olivia smiled in the darkness and did exactly that. Dawn came clear and beautiful, the mountain air crisp and clean. Olivia climbed out of the wagon to find Quentin already up, checking the repaired wheel by the early light. The rawhide had dried overnight, and when he tested the bindings, they held firm. "Looks good," he said, satisfaction in his voice. "Should get you back to Truckee no problem if we take it easy." They worked together to break camp and hitch up the horses again, their movements synchronized like they had been doing this together for years instead of hours. When everything was ready, Quentin swung up onto his horse and looked at Olivia with concern. "I will ride alongside you," he said. "Just in case something goes wrong with that wheel." The journey back to Truckee took most of the morning, the wagon rolling slowly over the rough trail. Quentin kept his horse at a walk beside the wagon, and they talked the whole way. Olivia found herself telling him things she had not told anyone, about her fears for the store now that competition was increasing, about her loneliness in a town where most women her age were already married with children. Quentin shared his own stories, tales of Wyoming winters and summer roundups, of losing his parents within a year of each other, and the grief that had set him to wandering. By the time the buildings of Truckee came into view, Olivia realized with a pang that she did not want this journey to end. These hours with Quentin had been the most alive she had felt in months, maybe years. The thought of him riding on, disappearing into the California landscape, made her chest ache. They rolled down the main street of Truckee, and Olivia was aware of eyes watching them from windows and doorways. The town was small enough that everyone knew everyone's business, and she knew there would be questions about the cowboy riding beside her wagon. but she found she did not care as much as she thought she would. When they reached her father's store, a sturdy building on the corner of the main street, Olivia's father came hurrying out. Samuel Kendrick was a tall man gone silver at the temples, with kind eyes that currently held worry and relief in equal measure. "Olivia, thank God," he said, reaching up to help her down from the wagon. "When you did not come back last night, I was about to organize a search party." His eyes moved to Quentin, assessing. "Papa, this is Quentin Zimmerman," Olivia said quickly. The wagon wheel broke about halfway to the mining camp. Quentin came along and fixed it with what he had on hand. I would still be stranded out there if not for him. Samuel's expression shifted to gratitude as he took in the makeshift repair on the wheel. "That is some fine work," he said, extending his hand to Quentin, who had dismounted. "I am grateful to you for helping my daughter, Mr. Zimmerman. Come inside. Let me pay you for your time and trouble." "That is not necessary, sir," Quentin said, shaking his hand firmly. "I was just doing what anyone would do." "Nonsense," Samuel said, his tone brooking no argument. "You went out of your way and used your own supplies, I insist. Plus, I would like to hear the full story." Inside the store, which was crammed with everything from canned goods to mining equipment, Samuel poured 3 cups of coffee and listened as Olivia and Quentin together told the story of the previous day. Olivia watched her father's face, seeing the moment his assessment of Quentin shifted from wary to approving. "You did right by my daughter," Samuel said when they finished. "That means something to me, Mr. Zimmerman." He counted out several bills from the cash box, far more than the repair warranted, and pressed them into Quentin's hand despite his protests. "I do not suppose you are looking for work. I could use someone with your skills. The store always needs supplies hauled, deliveries made, repairs done. It would not be ranching, but it would be steady work and decent pay." Olivia's heart leaped, and she tried to keep her expression neutral as Quentin considered the offer. She saw him glance at her, saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I was planning to head up to the mining camps," Quentin said slowly. "But steady work in a town like this sounds pretty good. If the offer is genuine, Mr. Kendrick, I would be honored to accept." The smile that broke across Samuel's face was matched only by the joy that flooded through Olivia. She tried to hide it, but when Quentin's eyes met hers again, she knew he could see it written all over her face. Over the following weeks, Quentin settled into life in Truckee. Samuel set him up in a small room above the store, and he proved himself invaluable. He could fix anything, build anything, and had a way with the customers that made him popular in the community. But Olivia knew, even if no one else did, that Quentin's eyes sought her out a dozen times a day, that his smiles were brightest when they were directed at her. They found excuses to work together. Olivia would need help loading supplies and Quentin would appear. Quentin would need inventory counts and Olivia would volunteer. In the evenings after the store closed, they would sit on the porch and talk for hours, their conversations ranging from profound to silly, always easy, always comfortable. "I am glad you stayed," Olivia said one evening about 3 weeks after he had first fixed her wagon. They were watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in impossible colors. "Me too," Quentin said quietly. He was sitting close enough that their shoulders almost touched, propriety maintained but the attraction undeniable. "I think maybe this is what I was looking for all along. I just did not know it until I found it." Olivia's breath caught. "Quentin, I know it has only been a few weeks," he said, turning to look at her directly. "I know I am just a ranch hand with not much to my name, but Olivia, I have to tell you. From the moment I saw you standing by that broken wagon, refusing to panic even though you had every right to, I have not been able to get you out of my head. You are smart and brave and beautiful, and I think about you every minute of every day." Her heart was thundering so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I think about you too," she whispered. "I have never felt this way about anyone before." Quentin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip strong and gentle at the same time. "Can I court you properly, with your father's permission and the town knowing my intentions?" "Yes," Olivia breathed. "Yes, I would like that very much." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, and Olivia felt that touch all the way to her toes. When he lowered their joined hands, he did not let go, and they sat there as the stars came out, fingers intertwined, both of them grinning like fools. Samuel gave his blessing the next day, and if he had suspected the growing attachment between his daughter and his new employee, he gave no sign of it. The courtship was proper and public, Quentin calling on Olivia under her father's watchful eye, taking her to church socials and town gatherings. But there were also stolen moments, brief touches when no one was looking, whispered conversations that made them both flush and smile. Autumn came to the Sierra Nevada, painting the mountainsides in gold and red. On a clear October afternoon, Quentin took Olivia on a picnic to the clearing where they had camped that first night. He had planned it carefully, packing a basket with all her favorite foods, spreading a blanket under the pines. "I wanted to bring you back here," he said as they sat together, the autumn sunlight dappling through the branches. "This is where I knew Olivia. This is where I looked across that fire and realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life looking at you." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "Quentin." He shifted, kneeling on the blanket, and pulled a small box from his pocket. When he opened it, a modest but beautiful gold ring caught the sunlight. "I have been saving every penny since your father hired me. It is not much, but it is honest work, and I promise you I will spend the rest of my life working to give you everything you deserve. Olivia Kendrick, will you marry me?" "Yes," Olivia said, tears spilling over now. "Yes, absolutely yes." Quentin slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was pulling her into his arms, and for the first time, he kissed her. It was gentle and fierce all at once, full of promise and passion, and Olivia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with everything she felt. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I have loved you from the beginning." "I love you too," Olivia said, and she had never meant anything more in her entire life. They were married in December, a small ceremony in Truckee's church with most of the town in attendance. Olivia wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, and Quentin wore a new suit that Samuel had insisted on buying for him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin kissed her like he had been waiting his whole life to do it, and the congregation erupted in cheers. The first winter was hard, as all winters in the Sierra Nevada were hard. Snow piled up to the rooftops, and the cold bit deep. But Olivia and Quentin weathered it together, warm in the small house that Samuel had helped them buy just down the street from the store. They worked side by side in the store during the days, Quentin taking on more responsibility as Samuel began to talk about eventually retiring. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Quentin often reading aloud while Olivia worked on mending or knitting, their feet tangled together under a shared blanket. "Tell me the story again," Olivia would say sometimes, "about how you fixed my wagon." And Quentin would laugh and pull her close and recount the tale, embellishing it more each time until they were both laughing. "And there she stood," he would say, his voice dramatic, "the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, refusing to be defeated by something as simple as a broken wheel." So I said to myself, Quentin, if you let this woman roll out of your life, you are the biggest fool who ever lived. That is not how it happened, Olivia would protest, giggling. That is exactly how it happened, Quentin would insist, kissing her soundly. The details are irrelevant. What matters is that your wheel broke and I fixed it, and now here we are. Spring came, and with it the news that Olivia was expecting their first child. Quentin was ecstatic, immediately becoming overprotective, insisting she rest more, work less. Samuel was delighted at the prospect of becoming a grandfather, already starting to build a cradle in the back room of the store. I hope it is a boy, Quentin said one evening, his hand resting on Olivia's still flat stomach. A son to carry on the family name. Or a daughter, Olivia said, covering his hand with hers. Smart and strong like her father. Stubborn and brave like her mother, Quentin countered with a grin. The baby arrived in late October of 1880 as the aspens were turning gold on the mountainsides. It was a long labor that left Quentin pacing the floor downstairs, Samuel keeping him company and sharing stories of when Olivia was born. When the midwife finally called him up, Quentin took the stairs 3 at a time. Olivia lay in their bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Quentin approached almost reverently, looking down at the tiny red face of his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making soft, snuffling sounds against Olivia's chest. Quentin felt his eyes burn with tears as he carefully sat on the edge of the bed. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this." "You fixed my wagon wheel," Olivia said with a tired smile. "And then you fixed my heart." They named him Matthew Zimmerman, and he was indeed perfect. Samuel was a doting grandfather, constantly finding excuses to hold the baby, making toys for him in the back room of the store. The whole town celebrated the birth, bringing casseroles and baby clothes and advice. As Matthew grew from baby to toddler, Olivia and Quentin's life in Truckee deepened and settled. Samuel officially made Quentin a partner in the store, recognizing both his skill and his dedication. They expanded, adding a new section for hardware and tools, with Quentin taking the lead on that side of the business while Olivia managed the dry goods and household items. The store prospered, becoming known throughout the region for its fair prices and quality merchandise. 2 years after Matthew, they had a daughter. Emma arrived in the spring, a tiny thing with her mother's eyes and her father's determination. Quentin fell in love all over again, this fragile little girl who wrapped him around her tiny finger from the moment she drew breath. "Our family is complete," Olivia said one evening when Emma was about 6 months old. They were all together in the parlor, Matthew playing with wooden blocks on the floor, Emma sleeping in her cradle, Quentin reading the newspaper by lamplight. Olivia was darning socks, but she paused to look around at her family, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Complete and perfect," Quentin agreed, lowering his newspaper to smile at her. Even after years of marriage, that smile still made her heart skip. "Do you ever think about that day your wagon broke?" "All the time," Olivia said. "Best thing that ever happened to me." "Second best," Quentin corrected. "The best thing was me coming along to fix it." Olivia threw a ball of yarn at him, laughing, and he caught it one-handed, grinning unrepentantly. Matthew looked up from his blocks, giggling at his parents' antics, and Emma stirred in her cradle at the sound. The years rolled on, bringing changes and constants in equal measure. Samuel eventually retired fully, turning the store over to Olivia and Quentin, though he remained a fixture there, telling stories to customers and teaching Matthew the ropes. The store continued to thrive, and they opened a second location in a nearby mining town, with Quentin making regular trips to oversee it. Matthew grew into a serious boy who loved books and numbers, while Emma was wild and free-spirited, always climbing trees and exploring. When Matthew was 8 and Emma 6, they surprised everyone by having another child, a boy they named Samuel after Olivia's father. The elder Samuel cried when they told him, and he doted on his namesake with shameless favoritism that made everyone smile. Through it all, through the busy years of raising children and running a business, through the harsh winters and beautiful summers, Olivia and Quentin's love only deepened. They still made time for each other, still had their evenings by the fire, still held hands when they walked down the street. The people of Truckee called them the most devoted couple in town, and no one argued. "You have any regrets?" Olivia asked Quentin one night when they were in their 40s. The children were all finally asleep, the house quiet around them as they lay in bed together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Not a single one," Quentin said firmly. "That day I rode up on your broken wagon was the luckiest day of my life. Everything good I have, everything I am started right there. You could have been a big rancher," Olivia teased gently, "or a mining baron. Instead, you are a shopkeeper in a small mountain town." "I am a husband and father," Quentin corrected, turning to face her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I am the man who gets to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I am the man who has 3 incredible children and a business I am proud of and a community I belong to. Olivia, I have everything I ever wanted. I have more than I ever dreamed of having." Olivia kissed him, still feeling that flutter in her stomach after all these years. "I love you, Quentin Zimmerman." "I love you too, Olivia Zimmerman, forever." Time continued its steady march, and their children grew into fine young adults. Matthew went off to San Francisco to study accounting, though he promised to come back and help with the business eventually. Emma, surprising no one, married a rancher and moved to Oregon, writing long letters full of adventures. Young Samuel decided to become a teacher, taking a position in Truckee's growing school system. Samuel Sr. passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by family. At the funeral, half the town turned out to pay their respects to the man who had helped build Truckee into what it had become. Olivia grieved deeply, but she found comfort in Quentin's steady presence, and in the knowledge that her father had lived to see his grandchildren grown and his business thriving. When Olivia and Quentin reached their 50s, they began to talk about the future of the store. Matthew had come back to Truckee as promised, bringing with him a wife and modern ideas about inventory management. Emma visited regularly with her growing brood of ranch-raised children. Samuel taught in the mornings and helped with the store in the afternoons, courting a pretty schoolteacher who made him happy. "We built something good," Olivia said to Quentin one evening as they sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set behind the mountains just like they had done countless times before. "The store, our family, our life here." "We did," Quentin agreed, reaching over to take her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding ring, worn smooth by decades of wear. "And it all started with a broken wheel and some rope and rawhide. And a cowboy who knew how to fix things," Olivia added, squeezing his hand. "And a woman brave enough to trust a stranger," Quentin countered. They sat in comfortable silence, their hands linked, their lives intertwined so completely that neither could remember what it had been like to be alone. Around them, Truckee settled into evening, smoke rising from chimneys, lights coming on in windows. The town had grown over the years, the railroad bringing more people, more opportunity, but it had kept its sense of community, its mountain character. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night we camped together?" Olivia asked suddenly, About roots. I said roots were what you held onto when the winds blew hard, Quentin recalled. You have been my roots, Olivia said softly. All these years, through everything, you have been what I held onto. Quentin brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently just like he had done the first time he asked to court her. And you have been mine. You and this town and this life we built together. I was drifting before I met you, Olivia. You gave me a place to belong. As full darkness fell and the stars came out, one by one above the Sierra Nevada, Olivia rested her head on Quentin's shoulder, feeling his warmth, his strength, his enduring love. Behind them, through the window, they could hear Matthew and his wife discussing the store, making plans for the future. Somewhere in Oregon, Emma was probably wrangling her children into bed. In town, Samuel was likely walking his sweetheart home from church choir practice. Their family, born from a chance encounter on a dusty trail, thrived and flourished. The store that Olivia's father had started and that she and Quentin had expanded would continue into the next generation and beyond, a fixture of Truckee's Main Street. And at the heart of it all was a love story that had started with a broken wheel and a cowboy who knew how to fix things. "Thank you," Olivia whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Quentin asked. "For stopping that day. For not just riding past." Quentin turned and kissed her forehead, tender and sweet. "Olivia, I could no more have ridden past you than I could have stopped breathing. You were standing there in the sunlight and I knew you were going to change everything." "We changed everything together," Olivia corrected. "Together," Quentin agreed. "Always together." And as they sat there under the vast star-filled sky, surrounded by the mountains that had watched their story unfold, Olivia knew that her life had turned out better than any dream she could have imagined. The wagon wheel breaking that day in August of 1879 had seemed like a disaster, but it had been the beginning of everything beautiful. It had brought Quentin into her life, this man who had fixed more than just a wheel. He had fixed her loneliness, her fears, her doubts about the future. In the years that followed, they would grow old together in that house in Truckee. They would welcome more grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. They would see the 20th century dawn, bringing with it automobiles and electric lights and changes they could never have imagined in their youth. But through all of it, their love remained constant, a touchstone, a foundation. When Quentin passed away at the age of 81, surrounded by 3 generations of family, his last words were of Olivia. "My beautiful girl," he whispered, his hand reaching for hers. "My Olivia. Best thing I ever did was stop to help you that day." Olivia held his hand as he slipped away, her heart breaking and whole at the same time. They had been married for 55 years, and every single one of them had been a gift. She grieved deeply, as did the entire town, but she also celebrated the incredible life they had built together. She lived another 5 years, watching her grandchildren have children of their own, seeing the store continue to thrive under Matthew's management, reading Emma's letters full of ranch news and Samuel's stories about his students. And when her own time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, a smile on her face, dreaming of a summer day in 1879 when a wagon wheel broke and a cowboy rode into her life. They buried her next to Quentin in Truckee's cemetery, on a hillside overlooking the town they had loved. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and the dates that bracketed their remarkable lives. But those who had known them said that the real monument to Olivia and Quentin Zimmerman was not the stone but the thriving business they had built, the strong family they had raised, and the love story that had become legend in the little mountain town. For generations afterward, when young couples in Truckee faced troubles or doubts, the old-timers would tell them the story of Olivia and Quentin. of how a broken wheel and some rope and rawhide had led to a love that lasted a lifetime, of how sometimes the worst moments turn into the best beginnings, of how a stranger can become your whole world if you are brave enough to trust them, and always, always, the story ended the same way. They loved each other until the very end and built something beautiful together. That is what real love looks like. The store they founded still stands on Truckee's Main Street, now run by their great-great-grandchildren, a testament to what can be built when two people find each other against all odds. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings when the light hits just right, locals swear they can see two figures sitting on the old porch, hand in hand, watching the sun set behind the Sierra Nevada mountains, together for all eternity as they always were in life.